So just to give you a brief overview about the types of technology, and since the theme is about the revolution of technology, I just want to take you through how it started and where it is going to. So first of all, we talk about a technology called robotic process automation. So robotic process automation is the first stage if you want to accelerate your digital transformation journey from a process improvement point of view. So RPA, in other words, it's the basic thing. And in Sri Lanka, most of the companies, the larger companies actually adapting it. Companies like banks, group companies, are so on already invest in it. But for us, a SME company or a smaller company, the RPA might be somewhat expensive for you to invest in because it comes with an annual license cost. And RPA technology is able to do much more than just a basic automation tool. For example, you could use it to talk to multiple systems. If you have to open, say, your ERP system, talk to a website, talk to your email, it's able to interact with all those forms of technologies, perform the process and complete. But however, RPA is only able to do rule-based tasks, which means it can only automate a process for which it does not need human thinking, where it's somewhat repetitive and it's rule-based. So you can't, which means use it to automate so many processes, but you can obviously do something which is repetitive, like a reconciliation process, a calculation, a data entry job, and so on. But if you're trying to go to that next level, then you need to adopt what is called cognitive intelligent automation, or what data analysts will call it machine learning technology. So what that means is your automation gets a bit more smarter and it uses a bit more intelligence, where it's also able to use its own intelligence and understand whether this judgment needs to be approved or not. So a good example is if you need to approve some sort of an invoice, which is based on certain criteria, obviously bot won't be able to do it because it requires human judgment if it's not rule based. But if you have trained some sort of a bot to understand, these type of criteria, if it meets the particular point, then it needs to be approved. So that is where you can actually bring in cognitive intelligence, where the bot gets a bit more smarter. I know it's a bit scary, but it doesn't mean it's going to be as smart as a human as at this point. But when you go to the next level, which is chatbots, chatbots basically is where you use a bit of natural language processing, and it's a bit more advanced technology where you get the bot to actually talk to you, and you can communicate. You will actually talk to the bot, but you'll be typing to the bot. For example, if you have worked with various websites, you'll get a chatbot that pops up and tells you, what you need. So in those type of scenarios, really how it works is it's not magical. I mean, somebody has programmed the bot to ask these particular questions, and then based on what you type, it will give an answer. So if you type something which the program is not being able to answer, then there won't be any answer. It might just say, please type again. So chatbots also, you get normal chatbots and you get intelligent chatbots. So the intelligent chatbots is when you're going into artificial intelligence. Now that's the next level. So if I was to give you examples of artificial intelligence, you would say Google, if you or Siri from Apple, where you can talk to them, they will talk to you, explain to you. So you could ask, say, Siri, or you could ask Google, whatever you want to, and Google will do it. So now that works on artificial intelligence because there's a limit to the amount you can program. So artificial intelligence means you have trained it. Now it's able to think on its own, and it's able to exceed certain parameters as well. So a classic example about when artificial intelligence first hit the world was long time ago when IBM developed software called Deep Blue. That Deep Blue robot was able to beat the chess world champion, which was the first time where a robot was smarter than a human. So the robot, first of all, lost to the chess champion, but after a while, it got smarter because all these types of models, it learns the same way your brain learns as a kid. These type of models also learn. So when you talk about AI, then it's more like they are actually as smart as humans, or they're actually more smarter than humans because they are, for example, it has beaten the world chess champion. Right. So now talking to you about actual technologies which companies can use. First of all, if you talk about a freely available software where there's no license cost, we call it scripting solution, or the first table here. Now, this is something which definitely your companies could look at, because we at Ernst & Young, we use our own in-house development teams. Myself, I'm a developer, and we come up with a scripting solution. Most of us work on Excel. I'm sure you would have heard about Excel macros, where you can run a macro and the macro will do the calculation within Excel. So a scripting solution is something like that. But apart from that, we use other sorts of programming languages to also get the task done, where we can connect to a database, download data, do reconciliations, do Excel calculations, and so on. So that is where we can use a scripting solution for which there is no license fee. It could be just our development cost, and it's very affordable for companies. But however, it is limited. You can't use a scripting solution, as I said, to open up your ERP system, open up your website. For example, take data from one area and paste it in the system. Let's say if you need to approve a invoice in your system, you have to go into the system and click buttons and type details and so on. So that requires more advanced technology, where it needs to interface with the application of your system. So it's something which we can program, but then the development time it takes to do it is not worth. So it's about being smart and using a technology that is already developed. So for those type of instances, we use robotic process automation, as I said, but you can actually use it to do those types of activities. So if you come back to the first slide where I spoke to you about a technological revolution, it's about why is there a technological revolution? It's because we do not need to develop things from scratch. There are now technologies which are already available. You just need to be smart enough to be able to integrate it with all of them. For example, AI technology. I don't need to develop a chatbot, or I don't need to develop something which IBM already has. I could use something called API keys, or what API key is, I could integrate that particular technology with my robotic process automation software, and it will be able to get the best of the AI and work with it. So I don't have to be a data scientist or a very experienced programmer to do it. Now with this technological revolution, everything is integrated, everything can be connected. You just need to know how the connection works. So that is why we are going to enter into the fourth industrial revolution, which is technology, because everything now it's connected. It's very easy to connect. We don't have to start from scratch. We could just build unbelievable things by just integrating it with all these advanced technologies. Then apart from robotic process automation, now robotic process automation is there to do specific tasks. It is not the best solution to do, if I would say, an entire end-to-end process. For example, if you have a process that you need to, which a human needs to sign it. For example, if you have to create an invoice, you will manually create an invoice on paper that would go to the next person to approve. They would sign it off, and finally it would get approved. Then the accountant would pass the entries in the system. Now that process practically cannot be automated, because if you're trying to automate, first of all, you can't work with a handwritten document. I mean, you can work with a handwritten document, but then the automation cost is high, because you'll have to integrate it with advanced technologies that's able to read handwritten documents. And also if the handwriting is not clear, so it won't work. I mean, those type of cases, if you try to automate, then it also needs to go to an approval. So for example, on a daily basis, let's say you have thousands of invoices, somebody needs to approve, somebody needs to sign it off, and then only it goes to the appointment. It goes to the accountant, and then the accountant will take that invoice, pass the entries in the system, and it will record that particular transaction. So it's an end-to-end process. So you can't use RPA to do that, because RPA is not a tool that works like an approval engine, where it sends it to one person, waits for that person to approve, sends it to the next person, waits for that person to approve, and finally will take it to the accountant and pass the entries in the system and close it out. RPA can do that final part, which is once the transaction has been, or the invoice has been processed, thereafter it could take the data from the invoice and then put it into the system and close the transaction out. But it can't do that first bit of it. If you want to do it with RPA, it won't be optimal, because it will be a major re-engineering. For example, that is what Hiranki said about transformation, and why Ernst & Young is one of the leaders globally when it comes to development or process improvement with automation, because we are able to change the process, convert a manual process into a digitized process. So if I'm going to convert this process, it's a major change. You'll first of all need to collect your data, maybe on a digital format. maybe as a digital form, like for example, Google Forms or Microsoft Forms, or maybe it will need to be changed in PDF. Then the approvals might have to be done upfront. So it's a major change about the way the process works. And finally, only after that is done, it needs to be sent to the bot. Regardless, still you can't do the approval automation because it does not make sense to use the RPA. So for that, there's something called a workflow solution, which is much more affordable than RPA, and it's good to do those type of processes. So for example, the workflow process is able to do that entire thing, and it would be done through a system. There would be an audit trail, you can control it, and it really will streamline the entire business. So it improves the automation potential, even trying to automate something which is done by humans, where you need to approve it, validate it, and so on. So now I'll just show you the RPA, what it looks like, and what the workflow situation also looks like. I hope you can see my screen. Can somebody confirm if they could see this new web page type screen?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great. So this is basically a workflow software called Power Automate, and it comes with the Microsoft ecosystem. So what's special about a workflow software is, now if you were to manually do that invoice approval process, you would need to create a form. So here, I've already created a form. Now it's not an invoice form, but I've just created a basic form just to show people, you know, what you really can do with the forms. Yeah, so here I have just made a basic approval form and a basic survey. But if I want to make it an invoice form, I could do so many things where I could add details, I could add more, so I could add new items to it, text, rate, and so on. So I could create an invoice form like this. It already gets digitized. And the advantage about this is thereafter, I just need to share this with whomever I want. Those guys will approve it. And after they do it, that content gets saved into Excel. So it's like the same way Google Forms get saved, right? And then the data would come in a columnar manner, it comes in a data table format. Then the RPA bot only needs to take the details from this Excel sheet and then put it in the system. So it's very easy, and it makes the entire process much more sustainable. So if I want to take that form, for example, now in Power Automate, you have so many types of templates. So I could look at the approval templates. Now they're created, and I could start a form. See, send form responses for approval. Start or create a planner, create an email. So there are so many types of activities I could create that could take the form from one person and send it to the other. And I could do it through an email. So for example, you would get the form through an email to approve it, and after it's approved, it would go to the next level. And finally, after that is done, the entire process could be end. Then after that, the bot could start the process by taking the data in this Excel, or for this particular example, where it takes this particular data and puts that into the system. So this type of technology is very useful for a company like yours, which is small scale, because you won't need now people, you won't need to invest in doing it manually. You can monitor it better. And also you could do this with multiple types of invoices. For example, you could create different formats, different methods of doing it. So now all this is talking about the workflow solution. Now, if you go to RPA is a bit more different. So I'll show you what the interface looks like. So RPA is something a bit more expensive. I won't say a bit more, but it is a substantial investment. And you could do far more, much more in RPA. So for example, I could open a browser. I just need to paste the link. I can open an application. This application can be anything. It could be your system, it could be your email. And some people don't actually believe when I tell them that you could open any system and work with it, because they are thinking, if it's an old system, how will it work? So it's very simple. Your system is based on an executable file. So it files the file path and it opens it. The same way a human will open it, the bot does interaction, opens it. And after it opens the system, it could do whatever human being needs to do with the system. So this particular software is UiPath. So it's UiPath, I won't recommend for small scale company because it's a substantial investment. But if you really want to work with RPA, there are low cost in RPAs as well, which work on a subscription basis, where you need to pay the fee on a monthly basis. I'll just give you an overview of the types of prices you will see when it comes to not RPA, because I'm not talking about RPA, but for workflow solutions. So if you take Microsoft Power Automate, when you go for a workflow situation, it needs to have that entire ecosystem, that is digital forms, email communication, approval, and all that. So here you see it's like $15 per user per month. And then after you get this, you could do really a lot of what you need. Then there's another workflow solution, which we are actually going to partner with soon. The prices are a bit more cheaper. So if any of you are interested in trying to learn more about these types of technologies, or who need help with demonstrations, please reach out to us, because we'll be able to guide you and show you about these types of solutions. But once again, this is not RPA. RPA is much more expensive. Right. So moving on, the next segment in where I believe that your companies could actually gain value is to data analytics. And this point is very important, because it says the world's most valuable resource is no longer oil, but data. So I just want you to think about that and why this statement was made in that manner. So first of all, what it really is data analytics? The way I see it is, data analytics is a chain of events. You first of all need to collect your data. You have to extract your data. So obviously collecting your data is now somebody will need to take your data and put it into the database. Extracting of data is you'll need to, IT people call it SQL queries, where you extract it from the database with this type of queries. And then you will need to put it into some sort of a tool to analyze it. And finally, you will visualize it through a dashboard. So it's simply a chain of events. So what type of dashboard analytics? So data analytics means you're visualizing in a dashboard. So what type of examples of dashboards do you need to build? So the common most important types of dashboards is, you could build a customer dashboard trying to understand your KYCs. You could build a dashboard on the marketing or sales performance. You could build a dashboard on compliance, trying to see if whether their regulations are in place, whether the rules are monitored, or we call it maybe journal entry process, where you actually try to monitor whether journal entries are passed well, are there any issues in it, and so on. Then there can be margin and efficiency dashboards that's based about your profit, liquidity, working capital, and finally risk reporting dashboard. So there could be multiple types of dashboards that you can create if you're trying to do data and analytics. So for data analytics also, I just want to show you, we use a tool called Power BI, which does the dashboard analytics. And it's something where you can connect to multiple types of databases. So how data analytics works is, you connect it not to your system, but it's the backend is always supported on a database. Even a website backend works on a database. Every single tool, every single system backend works on a database. So we can connect it directly to that database. And here I'm showing you this example about so many types of data tables, because we did this for a client. They had many data tables across many databases. So for example, there can be, on the left hand side, I'm showing you the types of databases. This client had a database in Oracle, they had a database in SQL, and so on. So we had to get all this data into one chart. So manually, if you're trying to do this, you're working with a lot of information, and manually there's to spend weeks just to get the monthly information to provide the KPIs to the management. While we gave them a solution where once we fixed the dashboard, with just a few clicks, they were able to do what they need. And it's connected to the database. So it's 100% reliable. There are no errors. And it's very easy for you to monitor the business. So if you're a managing director, if you're a CFO, if you're the owner of the business, you don't have to depend on people to actually take time to generate the report. You could be given your very own personalized dashboard for you to do whatever you need. So here I will show you a dashboard which we have developed some time back, where we are showing the current banking situation in the country. So I'm not going to talk to you too much about this, but just to show you really what you can do. You could filter it, you could change visuals. Now in this particular situation, it's connected to a database, and the database is my Excel sheet where I have stored all the data. I could zoom in, I could zoom out, I could do multiple things. And then when I click on any of these visuals, for example, if it's commercial bank, it gets filtered by commercial bank. So there are multiple types of things you could do. For example, if I go to other slides, you could compare it, you could compare year wise, get data in different formats. Then if you also want to make it really visually appealing, you could add buttons in so many places. For example, I could click the star and a new pop-up comes up, dates pop up, I can filter by the bank and so on. So I don't want to spend too much time trying to visualize on a dashboard, but the main point is that these types of very visually appealing dashboards that are meaningful, and I could generate whatever insights that you think is key. And also from Ernst & Young side, we could also help you to identify what are the key insights that you need to visualize. So this type of a dashboard, the good thing is it's free. The desktop version is free, but of course, that is good to start with. So what we can do is, if you're really interested, we could build the dashboard using the free version. And once you really start to like it, then we can go for the license version. License version is also, like I said, Microsoft. It's about $20 per month, I would say. So something around that range. It's not a lot, and it could give you insights which can be really crucial for the rest of your business, and to monitor exactly what Mr. Jayasinghe said. Since you need to establish those type of parameters in this time, a dashboard solution would be the ideal solution for your business. So here are some of the other types of dashboards. So these type of dashboards I can't really share with you because it has confidential information. So everything I'm sharing is all based on dummy data that we have built. So you could build financial simulations where you could say, for example, if you reduce this expense or you increase this revenue, how does that impact on the bottom line? So you could really analyze in detail and really go into different types of analysis which you never thought was possible, because only once you get your data onto a dashboard and you really visualize it, would the first time you would be able to understand insights which you never thought possible. So many people have actually understood that only once they do this type of analysis. You might not think it's useful. You might think the same thing can be done in Excel. But once you really do it and you see the beauty of the visuals that come out, and you're able to really obtain meaningful insights, then you would actually see the value. So here is something for working capital to manage the business. It's a very simple dashboard, and it can be built really quickly based on the data points that we need to connect it to. But the insights that you can get from it is very powerful. For example, at any point in time, at any second, you will know what the business is doing, and it's 100% accurate data because it's connected to the database itself. Now, the other point is, if your data that you store in the database is not correct, that's an issue. So for some clients, we could even help you to basically strengthen that point to ensure that the way you collect the data is actually 100% accurate, because this only works if your data is correct. If your data is incorrect, then this whole exercise would be ineffective. So that's a very crucial point. If you're trying to work with data, your data needs to be accurate. If your data is not accurate, then this whole type of visuals won't work. So here just an example of, apart from data analytics, we could also look at a particular situation and try to get some insight. So here, since you actually heavily dependent on suppliers, there's something called supplier tailspin. Just a basic example where you could use data and analytics. So supplier tailspin means you should not have too many suppliers. When you have too many suppliers, you can't leverage on the economies of scale. For example, if you had hundreds of suppliers, as opposed to only a few suppliers, those few suppliers might give you better quality because they are dependent on you. And also you could get economies of scale from them, and your cost would be also low. You could control the pricing. But if you have many suppliers, maybe it could be that the procurement manager has received many gifts from many suppliers. That's why they are procuring from so many people. So which means it's a problem. You can't manage it. So if your tailspin, which means you have many small scale suppliers, that's an issue, because that puts a strain on your cost, and you're not able to generate the best type of cost saving you need. So we could do something like this to identify whether do you have a tailspin or not. Apart from that, another very useful analysis is based on Pareto. For example, if you want to find an issue and you want to know what is the main causes for this issue, you could do a Pareto and you could see which of those issues really calls or which of those problems is the main reason for the issue. So in this particular example, you're trying to see how you can reduce the employee reimbursement expenses, because employees are continuously reimbursing, it does not get approved and you have to continuously approve it. So here it's saying, based on the Pareto principle, that when it takes missing receipts, it's 30%, wrong exchange rate is 40%, and wrong field is 60%, and so on. So it's telling you that based on this example, that maybe if you take the first two bars only, or the first two problems, and you resolve it, you will be able to resolve 80% of the issues. So like this, you could build different types of visuals that could go a long way. So with that, I will conclude, and I'll hand it over to Trishma. Hi, Trishma.
Be unmuted. Yes. Okay, I'm unmuted now. All right. Thank you very much to Johan for that presentation, talking to us about adopting digital technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, we will have Q&A right after the translations of this presentation is done. So keep your questions ready. For now, let's have Mr. Dilan Silva joining us on the screen with a Sinhala translation.
Okay, thank you. අපිට අද සාකච්ඡා කරා ජොහන් ඇන්ඩර්සන් තුමා මේ කොහොමද අපි තාක්ෂණය පාවිච්චි කරලා කොහොමද අපේ දත්ත විශ්ලේෂණය කරන්න කියන එක. මොකද අපි කලින් මාතෘකාවේදී කතා කරපු එකක් තමයි අපිට දත්ත ටික ලැබුණා. දත්ත ටිකෙන් අපි කිව්වම මෙච්චර අයවයි බයවතරයක් තියෙනවා කරපු මේක විශ්ලේෂණය කරන කතාව එකට ආවා. ඉතින් එතනදී අපිට විශ්ලේෂණය කරන්නේ කොහොමද ඒකට අවශ්‍ය කරන දේවල්. The මුලින්ම එක කොටස් තුනක් කිව්වා. එකක් ඇවිල්ලා කිව්වා සරල විදියට ඒක පොඩ්ඩක් ඉහළ තත්වයකට ගන්න, ඊට පස්සේ තව ඉහළ තත්වයකට ගන්න. ඒ තුනෙම මුදල් යනවා අවම වියදමින් කරන්න පුළුවන් විදියකට විශ්ලේෂණයක් ගැන කතා කරනවා. ඒක උදාහරණයක් ගන්න Excel sheet එකක් මම Excel වගුවකින් මොනවද කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. මොකද තීරණයක් ගන්න අපිට දත්ත අවශ්‍යයි. දත්ත ඕන දත්තයක් මැන්නම තමයි තීරණයක් ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ මනින සාධක ටික සියලු දේම මේ කිව්ව Ernst & Young එකේ උපකරණ සරල එකකින් ඉඳන් වැඩි එකකට තියෙනවා කියලා. ඉතින් ඒගොල්ලන් එක්ක දත්ත කතා කරාට පස්සේ ඒගොල්ලන් එක්ක විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ විශ්ලේෂණය කරන ක්‍රමවේද තවදුරටත් උගන්වන්න පුළුවන් කියලා කිව්වා. ඒ විශ්ලේෂණය තුලින් අපේ සාර්ථකත්වයක් ගන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ කිව්වා මේ ඔටෝමේෂන් කියන එක කියන්නේ ඒ process එකේ විශ්ලේෂණය කරන ක්‍රමයේ දත්ත කම්පියුටරයිස් හරි තාක්ෂණික විදියට වර්ධනය කර ගන්න ක්‍රමවේද ගොඩක් කිව්වා. ඒක කිව්වා බුද්ධිය පාවිච්චි කරලා කරන එක තමාගේ බුද්ධියෙන් කිව්වා. ඊට පස්සේ කිව්වා AI කියන එක ගැන කතා කරා. artificial intelligence කෘත්‍රිම බුද්ධියෙන් කොහොමද කරන්න කියන කෘත්‍රිම බුද්ධියෙන් විශ්ලේෂණය කරන සීමා මොන මේ සාමාන්‍ය විශ්ලේෂණය කරන කතාවේ ඉතින් කෘත්‍රිම බුද්ධියෙන් විශ්ලේෂණය කරන කොච්චර තවදුරටත් තාක්ෂණය උසස්ද කියලා කිව්වා. උදාහරණයක් ගත්ත ගමන් කෘත්‍රිම බුද්ධිය පාවිච්චි කරලා කොහොමද චෙස් සංසේ සාර්ථකත්වයක් ගත්ත හැටි ගැන කිව්වා. ඉතින් ඒ තුල ඒ දත්ත විශ්ලේෂණය තමයි මූලික දේ කියලා එතුමා පැවසුවා. ඉතින් ඒ තමයි මූලිකම සාරාංශය උනේ මේ දත්ත විශ්ලේෂණය ගැන. ඒ වගේම කිව්වා ඒ විශ්ලේෂණය තුල තියෙන software තුල ඒ තාක්ෂණය තුල එක පිටුවක කොහොමද අපිට දත්ත එක පුවරුවක කොහොමද අපිට දත්ත ටික බලලා තීරණයක් ගන්න පුළුවන්. රටාව පොදු සාධකයේ සම්භාවිතාවය බැලිය යුතු සාධක බැලීමට අවශ්‍ය කරන පුවරුවක් හදාගෙන කොහොමද ඒක කළ යුත්තේ කියන්නේ. ඒව තමයි කතා කරේ. විශේෂයෙන්ම ඒකට අවශ්‍ය කරන දේවල් එච්චර වියදමක් යන්නේ නැතුව දැන් කරගන්න පුළුවන්. Ernst & Young ආයතනයේ ඒවට හරිය හැකියාවක් තියෙන දක්ෂතාව තියෙන පුද්ගලයෝ සිටිනවා. ඒගොල්ලන් තමයි සාකච්ඡා කරලා සරල විදියට හරි සුළු විදියට කරන්න පුළුවන්. අනිත් එක දත්ත 100% හරියන්න ඕනේ. ඒක මේ වෙන්න ඉතින් දත්ත කොහොමද 100% හරියට ගන්න ක්‍රමවේදය කළ යුතුයි. ඒක ගැන දක්ෂතාව එතුමාලාට තියෙනවා. ඒක ඒගොල්ලන් කතා කරලා කරනවා. ඒක තමයි විශේෂයෙන්ම කතා කරන්නේ. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dilan. And now for the Tamil translation, let me invite Mr. Thanithi Kokulan.
இந்த தொடரில் நாம் கற்றுக்கொண்டது என்னவென்று சொன்னால் அந்த டேட்டா மைனிங், டேட்டா அனாலிசிஸ் மற்றும் மெஷின் லேர்னிங் ஆகிய 3 படிநிலையூடாக எவ்வாறு நாங்கள் இந்த ப்ரோசஸ் ஆட்டோமேஷனை செய்யலாம் என்பது தொடர்பாக தான் நாங்கள் இந்த தொடரில் நாங்கள் கற்றுக்கொண்டோம். மற்றும் இந்த ஆர்டிஃபிஷியல் இன்டெலிஜென்ஸ் தொழில்நுட்பத்தினூடாக எவ்வாறு சாட்பாட் மற்றும் இந்த மெஷின் லேர்னிங்களை கொண்டு எவ்வாறு ப்ரெடிக்ஷன், அதாவது சேல்ஸ் ப்ரெடிக்ஷன் அல்லது ப்ரொடக்ஷன் போன்றவற்றை எவ்வாறு செய்து கொள்ளலாம் என்பது தொடர்பான ஒரு சிறிய ஒரு விளக்கத்தை நாங்கள் இந்த தொடரிலே பார்த்திருந்தோம். இந்த டெக்னாலஜிகளை உபயோகித்து நாம் எவ்வாறு நம்முடைய ரெஸ்ட் ரூமிலே இந்த தொழில்நுட்பங்களை கொண்டு எவ்வாறு நம்முடைய ப்ரொடக்ஷனை சீராகவும் மற்றும் முன்னேற்றகரமான பாதைக்கும் கொண்டு செல்லலாம் என்பது தொடர்பாக இந்த தொடரிலே நமக்கு விவரிக்கப்பட்டது. இதை கொண்டு நாம் நம்முடைய ப்ரொடக்ஷன் மற்றும் ப்ரோசஸ் மேனேஜ்மெண்ட்டை நம்முடையால் சிறப்பான முறையிலே முகாமை செய்து கொள்ள முடியும். நன்றி.
Thank you very much to Mr. Thanathy Pukulan. Ladies and gentlemen, in a few minutes from now, we will begin with our Q&A session. So make sure your questions are ready. Before that, let's remember our valued sponsor once again. Our sponsor for this webinar is PrintCare PLC. And we once again thank PrintCare for their contribution towards making this webinar possible. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, all of you in the audience have your opportunity now to ask your questions to the speakers. Feel free to ask your question in either one of two ways. One is through the chat option. You may write your question down. Or second, you may raise your hand, request to unmute yourself and ask your question verbally. So feel free to ask your questions right now. I did see that we had a question from Aruna Vikramarachi in the chat already, which Hiranti has already answered. So we will move on now to the other questions. I believe we have Mr. Dilan Silva who has a question he'd like to ask. So Dilan, it's over to you.
Yeah, actually, the first question I like to ask is about data information, and especially with the two types of education system in this country. This automation and things, the mindsets of two different people are different. The local education and the international education has a gap, and within that there is the difficulty of getting data and information and the mindset. How do you improve to get it together?
All right.
Anybody?
Who would you like to address this question to?
One of anybody in the panel.
Okay.
But it's human behavior is the main cause sometimes. So
All right. I'd like to request the host to unmute our speakers, both Johan, Mr. Manal, as well as Hiranti. We can unmute the speakers so that they can make their choice. Yes, Johan, would you like to take this up or?
Mr. Jayasingh or Hiranti?
Dilan, yeah, now, that is one of the problems is in our fundamental co-education system, because we tend to produce people who memorize and sort of come to solutions rather than analyze and come to solution. But saying that, I think there is a lot of changes that are taking place. I mean, you know that the government has already put in place a mechanism whereby in another 3 to 4 years, one of the largest exports are going to be IT. So in the IT field, you have to have people in the analytical, with the analytical mindset. So if I give you some statistics, even in our A-levels, out of the 180,000 students which get through A-levels, it's only about 60,000 students who are in the commerce field. The rest is all in some form of a science field. And even in the commerce field, the primary education system has now divided that into some IT as well as pure commerce. So we have the necessary talent, I believe, in Sri Lanka. It's a question of nurturing that, and there are now a lot more secondary education programs available which basically nurtures that. What we need to understand is even in the business arena, a lot of our businesses are run through experience, what I call gut feel. So a lot is like that, but we don't necessarily, I'm sure you all also must be knowing, and when it comes to SMEs type of thing, it's primarily experience. There is no question of relying on relating to numbers or relating to statistics or anything like that. Now, this is not expected to substitute that. It is expected to help you in that. So you certainly can take decisions based on gut feel or whatever, but the numbers should help you to see whether you're going in the right direction. So it is not necessarily there to sort of substitute or replace your gut feel. No, I don't think you can never replace that. And I'm a firm believer, even with AI, it will take a long time to for computers to mimic the human brain, because AI is also an algorithm at the end of the day, and algorithms are also developed by human beings. So the machine learning, all that is there, but it will take a long time where it can actually replicate the human brain. So I don't think we are there yet. And also AI is heavily dependent on data, the quality of data, integrity of data, whole lot of equations are there. That's why even today, if you take driverless vehicles, now we have had autopiloting in the airline industry for years, but that technology has still not come to our day-to-day life, like driverless vehicles and things like that. So there is some fine-tuning to it, but at the same time, the development in the IT field clearly enhances our decision-making capabilities, plus it helps us to analyze and come to the right choices. So it has to be used as a tool. So I think your question was about human behavior and human resources, and whether we have the right mindset in our system. And I think because if you look at some of the products that come out of Sri Lanka, they are all overseas, right? So it's coming out of the system. So not that we don't have it. It's just that we need to nurture them a little bit and nudge them into the right direction, and I think we are okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, we do have another
question. Sorry, is someone in? Hello?
Yes. Please identify yourself so we can.
Hi, I'm Chamila. Yes. I want to, so I have two questions actually. One is to Hiranti. Okay. To understand is there any, digital, is there any assessment kind of a thing to understand what is the current level of digital transformation that we need to do in a particular organization? I mean, I haven't gone through South Australian digital transformation assessment to assess the organization, what level of digital transformation that we are in. Is there any particular standard on that, or is there any particular standard that we can follow to understand the level that we are in as an organization?
I wouldn't say that there are standards, but there are frameworks available.
Okay.
So various organizations have come up with the framework, and Ernst & Young also has a stipulated framework to identify where you are in your digital journey. And those examples that I showed you are a result or an output of some of the assessments that we have done for clients in identifying the readiness for a digital transformation in some companies that we have assisted. There are frameworks available depending on the industry and the processes that you're looking at. You can follow those frameworks and come up with a status assessment.
If you can mention like few good toolkits, I mean the framework that we can follow as a company.
They aren't published, I'm afraid, at this moment, but they are basically harnessed by various corporates.
Right. Okay.
And they would use this framework in carrying out the assessment.
Okay.
Just to add to that, I mean, ENY also has published several. Even at a global scale, has already published plenty of content on digital transformation, and there's something already. If you just Google and see digital transformation, there's something called digital readiness, where you could see whether is your company ready to adopt a transformation. So like digital that readiness, yes, you could just type it on Google. And there's so much content. So we at Ernst & Young, we have our own frameworks because we're a global company where we used to assess the company. For example, you would see whether are you best in class or are you moderate or is it low. So we use so many parameters. It's a very simple framework. You could also maybe
that's exactly what I mean. Because when we talk to X and Y or when we Google it, like there are so many framework and the standards. So just to get an idea, okay, what is what is the best thing that we want to follow
I
it up?
can't say what
yeah.
is the best thing because I am biased to Ernst & Young, but like Ernst & Young, all the big fours also have framework. So I think the big four players in the consulting business, I think people think that big fours are audit firms, but not really. Big fours are now consulting firms, and they have invested heavily into technology. If you take Ernst & Young is one of the leaders when it comes to intelligent automation. So the content it publishes on technology can be very valuable, and it can have good insights.
Thanks, Johan.
Right.
And the second question, actually, the same Hiranti and Johan. Actually, now we are in manufacturing. So when we do the digitalization and others, normally the mindset of the finance and the other departments say, okay, you spend a lot of, it's about the ROI. I mean, like, what are the key criteria? When Hiranti was talking about, okay, she was telling about, okay, there is no, there are qualitative ROIs and quantitative ROIs. But then again, in the finance point of view, they ask, okay, how much we save? How much we're going to save in terms of operations or something like that. So as a company, we try to take it as there's an indicator called OEE, overall equipment effectiveness. Through that, we try to get an idea, okay, this much of efficiencies that we can get. But I need to get some idea, okay, what are the things that we can have in terms of calculating the ROI with the investment through this journey on IR 4.0.
Correct. So when you spoke about OOE, it's about efficiency. I know those type of metrics, KPIs, which is from a manufacturing point of view. So that's from a automation of a actual machine. So we are talking about automation. Basically, it's a desktop automation. We're not talking about a physical robot. We're talking about a digital robot. So if you're talking about digital automation, you're talking about automating operations which are done through a desktop. Example, if it's your finance operation, if it's a payroll operation, if it's a procurement operation. So that automation saving, and compared with your machine saving for OOE or other sorts of KPIs that you might have, like lead time and defects and so many types of KPIs. So if you want to monitor the digital type of automation saving, then for that also we have our own frameworks. For example, we will look, say we will take the finance department, we'll spend some time in finance, we'll identify processes, and you can even give us the parameters. Whether do you want to identify a process which can give you 8 hours saving on a daily basis. Then we'll go in and we'll identify activities like that, and we'll build up a pipeline. So we'll identify 20 activities which can be automated. And then when I say automated, I mean a process which definitely can be automated, because you don't want to automate a process which has human judgment, human thinking, and is very complex, because then it won't be practical to automate. It might take a long time to develop and you might not get that saving. So we will select the right process which can be automated really quickly. We come up with a plan to say, okay, let's try to automate 5 activities, and then at the end of the automation, you might have a saving of 1,000+ hours, and the time frame will say we'll take 1 year to do it, and we'll build that pipeline, and we'll give you that presentation, or we'll give you that document, and thereafter, based on it, you could take the call whether are you going to go ahead with the investment or not. So we actually help clients to start that journey by giving the justification they need for the automation. So we call that as a process discovery assessment that we do.
Okay, thanks, Johan. Thanks.
All right, thanks for your question. Do we have any other questions coming in from our audience? I do believe we have a question from Viraj Jayasurya, who is our first Vice President. Viraj, if you'd like to ask your question now. I'm also told we have a question from Mr. Sendil Nathan, our General Secretary. So perhaps we can have Mr. Sendil to ask his question. Let's make sure Mr. Sendil is unmuted.
Thank you very much, Trishma. My question to Johan. Johan, you are spot on. I think your presentation is well received. My question to you, in the industry of printing, we find there's a gap between the middle management and the senior management. I think the upcoming middle management with a lot of technological expertise is finding very difficult convincing the senior management for any approvals. So how do you bridge this gap? How do you convince the senior management with the new developments in digital transformation and industry 4.0? Because some of those senior managers are legends or industry experts, but still they take the decision. So what is your suggestion, or how do you bridge this gap, Johan?
I think maybe this question, maybe Hiranti might be better to take on that question, or maybe Mr. Jayasinghe also might be better versed to take on the question. Mr. Jayasinghe, would you like to take up that question? Because it's more from a point of maturity. How do you get mature individuals to change, to adopt digital technologies? Or shall I take it up?
Yeah, no, actually, Cynthia, that is why what I mentioned earlier. The issue here is many people in Sri Lankan businesses, we have the senior people who have come through the process with a lot of experience and know-how, right? So immediately when you go and tell them, we have to automate, or we have to bring all these things, and the benefits are you'll have better data and all. Now it's alien to them because they were never managing this with data. They were managing it with a lot of experience, right?
Sure.
So it's a question of how you package and communicate to them. They need to also be on board to say that whatever this process is going to add value to them. Now, if they don't see the value in this, just us knowing the value is not going to work, because they are the ones who are making the decision at the end of the day.
Correct.
So to me, it's a big communication gap that has to get resolved, because we need to then understand what really makes them work or tick, and then put this in that form so that they are convinced that this is the way to go. Automation or whatever it is. It's not only the small companies, you'll be surprised. Some of the very large institutions, because when they see the investment that they have to put through into the IT or in that automation field, they basically knock it off, because it's a cost, right? At the end of the day. So the value will come only in the future. Value will come in the form of intangibles also, better decision making. Sometimes I think one gentleman said the question, they immediately.
We can't hear you, Mr. Manilan.
I think we are having a connection issue. Okay. Johan, would you like to complete those thoughts? Or?
It was hard to complete what Mr. Jayasinghe is saying, but I think from a personal point of view, also I guess it's a generation shift, because the current generation is born into technology, and when you have been, for example, making decisions based on reports which are handwritten, or based on Excel sheets, or basically looking at paper, for you to shift to something like something that comes in a digital manner is something new to you. So whether can you trust it would be the question. I think Mr. Jayasinghe is back online.
Sorry, I got disconnected. Yeah, so it's a bit of a difficult journey, and it's a question of convincing the senior management or the executive management how you can create value and add value. And the biggest problem is, we are living in times where when we spend money, we like to see the result of that money immediately. And unfortunately, some of these don't come with the immediate response or immediate outcome. So that's where the difficulty comes. So you have to identify, sometimes it's good to identify in the top management someone who is somewhat favorable to that, and use them as a catalyst to convince the others. So different strategies will have to be used to convince. But this is a question of convincing, right?
Of course, yes.
So I can't give you a black and white answer, but it's human management, or it's conflict management that has to come into play, and then try and convince the people. Because see, it's also sometimes difficult. Most of the senior people, whatever they have done, it has worked, because that is how the companies are at a particular stage now. So since it has worked, now you are coming and telling some different way of doing things, or different things, which may or may not, they may not see value, because they are going by history and say, look, it has worked for me. Well, I didn't know all this, but I still managed to bring this entity to this level. So it's a long and difficult road, I know, but so you have to slowly convince them and sort of win them. Also, I have noticed that sometimes don't go with a big ticket. Go with small items where you can show the success, and then convince them to move to the big item. So if you go with a big project, it will get shut down. So go with small scale projects which you can show success, and then once you bend them, or once you get over that initial resistance, then you will be able to bring in the different levels of automation. So say in a simple business like you bring in some system for better working capital management. So when they see that this has improved the cash flows, or this has improved collections, or whatever it is, then they are likely to be convinced that this is the way to go for the rest of the business as well. So go identify those elements that are of some concern to them, and try to give solutions to that first before going for the bigger item.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we do have 3 questions, and I'm afraid that's all the time we will have for. So we'll just take these 3 questions, and then we'll close it to Q&A. Let's have our next question from Aruna. Aruna, you can probably unmute and ask now. Yes.
Thank you. First, I like to thank the 3 presenters for this marvelous presentation. It's very insightful. As I'm from publishing industry, work for Vijay newspapers. So the digital transformation is not that new for us. Our processes have been transformed to digital long time ago. Basically, now they are running on the workflow systems. In today's context, we can't avoid the effect of the pandemic. So my question is, do you see a remarkable kind of a marked difference in the leaderships of these organizations approaching the AI after the pandemic when we compared with before the pandemic? Because pandemic put a lot of challenges before us. Pandemic forced us to take paths that we have never even tried before, like the remote working, all these things. In that context, how is AI faring when we are coming out of in the process of normalizing? Do you see a big interest?
AI to get adjusted itself. However, this pandemic has taught us a few things. One is the pace of digitization. I mean, I'm sure you are Vijay newspaper. If I asked a question about 3-4 years back about distributing, I mean, you all did have distribution of your news elements through electronic media, but what was the uptake? Very little. But the pandemic, I'm sure the uptake could have dramatically increased, right? The physical form is not there because physical form was not formidable. So immediately people started reading the web version, whatever it is, right? So you can see the shifts in the general population towards embracing digital delivery mechanisms. So now that shift will have to be considered in organization strategies. So even if you take the shop, the retail industry, a lot of us was used to going to a shop and buying things, look and feel and all. But today we are ordering things on the web, right? If you take the transportation industry, a lot of us would have used our car to go to some place. Now today we are using Ubers and Pick-me's and whatever it is to get out. So I feel that the whole landscape, business landscape out there is going to change. And digitization is the one that is going to make them change. So you are quite right in saying, are the strategic business decision makers factoring this into their strategy going forward? I think it's slow, but I feel that that has to happen faster. I don't know that I answered your question, but that's what I feel is going to happen.
All right, thank you. We have just 2 more questions, and maybe we'll make this short. So we'll have Selvam. Selvam, you can ask your question, please. Make it as crisp as possible.
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. I direct this question to Mr. Manilal. Actually, if you can see today newspapers, I saw that business confidence have been improved like last 2 months. So it was a good news. But again, we are in a dollar crunch. Already we are suffering on imports as well as our suppliers are not accepting these credit terms on use and this LC and all. Further adding to this fire, we hear that Moody's have downgraded the ratings, as well as we hear that a state bank has been blacklisted by a Chinese embassy, as well as there has been some gazette yesterday with regard to the conversion of dollars of exporters. So what is your take on this? Will it add further fuel, like further problems to our industry on importers in a whole? Like, what is your take, and how do we address this? How do we just go about it? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Good question. I may not necessarily have an absolute answer, but I can only sort of direct you with the way forward. Yes, all these things are happening. Meaning at some forum, I also raised the issue. We are a country which is somewhat struggling, and the rating agencies downgrade. What's going to happen? The ability for us to go and raise money in the international markets will further get impacted. So here is a question where you're already beaten, and the rating agency beating you further. So it's going to be difficult. So government is going to have a difficult task trying to manage all these things. Okay, so that's one part of it. Now the question is, what as businesses, what can we do? So we have to. That's why in the initial when I started, I said we have to now estimate the impact of this and how long it's going to take for the recovery, for government to take action. Now Moody's downgrade indicates that whatever actions that the government is taking, the rating agencies don't seem to be very favorable, or they seem to have a substantial amount of doubt about those measures, and that's why the downgrading took place to some extent. The government, of course, is not in agreement, but to some extent that is what it indicates. So if that is the case, you might find that this situation will prevail for a little while longer. So now the question is, how do we do business in this environment? So you have to now think outside the box and look at these limitations and come up with mechanisms where we can do business. So a couple of things are going to happen. One is, because of this dollar crisis, your cost of you will not be able to estimate your costs, right? So today, are you going to buy the dollar at 203, or are you going to buy it at 230, or are you going to buy it at 250? Now, depending on when the settlement comes, you will have a serious problem in your cost calculation, and you might have imported the goods, especially in the case of usage bills. You will import the goods, you would have sold those goods, and then later on you will get hammered with dollars, the currency, right? So in that environment, how do you cost your products? How do you determine a selling price? So a lot of issues are going to happen. So that is where you need to come up with out of the box type of solution. So what I told you is, now normally if you want to manage exchange, you would have tried to say do book forward, right? If you had forward payments, you will try to book forward. That way you know what the costs are going to be. So today you can't do that because they don't have forward sales anyway. So now you need to have an indirect method of hedging. So that's why I mentioned to you, you might have to come to an agreement with people who have foreign currency like exporters and lock on a price. So that way at least you know what your costs are going to be. So you might have to come up with out of the box thinking and solutions in order to navigate this difficult time. Because if we only allow or dependent only on the government solution, I think we are going to be in deep trouble. Another issue that Sri Lanka has is that, everything gets politicized in a dramatic way. And when it becomes politicized, other countries also look at all this public stuff that comes out and they take views on that stuff. Whether it's right or wrong is beside the point. So we tend to shoot ourselves in the foot also. Meaning, do you see this kind of debate happening in many other countries? No, it doesn't. Not in the public domain. I'm sure internally they have a lot of problems. But so the way we do things, our politicians, general public, and all these things also has an impact now. Even this crisis you talked about, the People's Bank getting blacklisted. Why did it happen now? The governor today also in the same newspaper talks about they can't pay because there's a legal case. So People's Bank, it's not that they are not honoring the LC. The LC terms you cannot honor because there is a case or whatever it is. So these are things which are also aggravating the whole situation. But as I mentioned to you, this is a function of us being a relatively a small economy, and these small shocks have a method of having a big impact.
Right. I hope that answers the question. We have one last question here, and in the interest of time, maybe we can make it really short. This question is from Muraj, and he asks, with regards to the adoption of digital technology, should we have different approaches for different scales of organizations? And if yes, what different approaches are recommended? Johan?
Yeah. Okay. So if you're talking about different scales for different organizations, I think that's a very valid point, because if you're a small organization, you might not want to start your journey with a very expensive investment. So if you talk about the expensive investments out there, robotic process automation is an expensive investment. If I was to tell you the fee, it might shock you. It's about 10,000 USD per annum. So which is like basically 2 million, I would say, or almost 2 million a year you would need to spend. So if you're a SME or a smaller company, for you to invest in something like that to start your journey, it might not be worthwhile. But if you're a bank, if you're a large PLC or a group company, then it makes sense, because you might have plenty of processors which are manual. And I could say that after I've done my discovery study, I could say I can save 10,000 plus hours. So if I compare 10,000 plus hours for the rest of the year compared with, say, 1 to 2 million expenditure, that 10,000 hours might be a cost saving of, say, 10 million plus. So anyway, your return on investment might be 20-30%. So something like that might be useful for a large company. But if you're a small company, there are other ways you can start your journey. One way is you could go ahead with the workflow solutions, which I spoke about, like Power Automate or other softwares like KISS Workflow, which are there, which can sort out simple problems like an approval process and things like that. And also definitely, before you talk about automation, first start with data analytics, because that is much more cheaper. And those tools have been produced in the market for some time. So the popular tools out there is Power BI, and there's also Tableau. But I would suggest Power BI. Main reason is because all of us use Microsoft. It's more easier to get connected with something which is close to the Microsoft ecosystem. So there is Power BI, which can be used as a tool for data and analytics. Then if you're talking about other freely available tools, there are scripting solutions. Like if you take Excel has Excel-based macros. So we could write a script in Excel that would do your Excel work. Then there are other programming languages, like, I'm not sure if you have heard of these, and this might sound funny, but it's not. It's Python. So Python is not the snake, but it's a programming language, and you could do a lot with Python. So you could use. So it's like there's C#, there is R. There are so many languages. So we could use a language to do the exact same script, but you won't have a license cost. So those are some of the tools which a smaller organization can go for. But if you're a larger organization, since you have money, you have plenty of areas to improve, you could definitely start with RPA.
All right, thank you, Johan. And with that, we are now going to wrap up our Q&A. I hope that answered Muraj's question. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you agree we've had a fascinating discussion. We've had many interesting perspectives shared, and I do hope this will help all of you in the Sri Lankan printing industry to adopt digital technologies and convert this crisis into an opportunity. Once again, thank you to our participants for their questions, and also thank you to our speakers for giving us the gift of your expertise and sharing with us your thought-provoking presentations and answers. Ladies and gentlemen, as we're almost coming to the end of our virtual event, we would now like to take this opportunity to offer some of our contributors our gratitude for their aid and their assistance. So to now officially sum up our appreciation and a vote of thanks, I'd like to welcome on screen the General Secretary of the Sri Lanka Association of Printers. Let's welcome Mr. Sendil Nathan.
Oh, thank you very much, Tishma. Considering the time factor, let me give my word of thanks in a very brief manner. First of all, our resource personnel and the presenters from Ernst & Young, country managing partner, Mr. Manil Jayasinghe, assurance partner, Iranti Fonseca, senior manager, intelligent automation and data analytics, Mr. Johan Anderson, for coming on board and enlightening the members of the Association of Printers. And we also value our sponsor, a partner for today's session, the PrintCare PLC. I would like to thank Mr. Krishna Ravindran, the General Manager, CEO of PrintCare PLC, for supporting the fraternity. And of course, our moderator, award-winning speaker, my good friend Trishma Pinto. Thank you, Trishma, for being with us. And I also like to thank the PrintTech Private Limited for all the logistics and organizing a very good moderator for this session. Let me also thank Mr. Peter Decker and the management of PrintTech Private Limited for organizing and contributing to this particular event. And actually, it's an initiative of our president, Mr. Peter Decker. Thank you, Peter, for initiating and implementing this wonderful webinar for all of us. And Mr. Johan Anderson, who is from Ernst & Young, who initiated and instrumental to have this webinar. Thank you, Johan. And our immediate past president, Mr. Dilan Silva, not as a past president, as also the singular translator. Thank you, Dilan. And for our Tamil translator, Mr. Dayaniti Gokulan. Thank you, Gokulan. And our secretarial staff, Lakshita and Leonard, for your support and the logistics. And of course, the members at large from the Association of Printers, thank you for being with us on a Saturday morning. And our next webinar is scheduled on 13th of November at the same time at 10 o'clock. So please keep the date and the time free, and we'll meet up on another wonderful webinar. So with that, let me hand over the proceeding back to Trishma. Over to you, Trishma.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Sendil Nathan, for your warm words of gratitude to everybody who has helped to bring this forum to life. Ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up today, let's once again acknowledge our esteemed sponsor, which is PrintCare PLC. And we wholeheartedly thank PrintCare for enabling us to make this forum a reality. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you found today's discussion interesting, it's our pleasure to inform you that SLAP has organized a few other webinars in the next month, and we're happy to invite you to join us for these upcoming webinars. The first one will be on the 12th of November. SLAP, in collaboration with EDB, is organizing a webinar at 2:30 p.m. This is an awareness program about printing to the SME sector. So feel free to join us on the 12th of November for that. And on the 13th of November, we also have a webinar on digital print embellishment. So we hope to see you all join us in that conversation as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we've almost come to the end of our dialogue here this morning, and I hope that today's discussion has provided you with immense opportunity to enhance your understanding on how to adopt digital technologies and manage the current crisis. We trust that the perspectives shared today will help you strengthen your business and take it to the next level. With that, we now draw the curtains to our discussion today, organized for you by the Sri Lanka Association of Printers. Thank you for your participation here today at a very insightful discussion. And for now, I wish you a pleasant week ahead. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.